So, hey, we are live. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the BAMF Podcast Writers Chat. I'm here with Ryan Banks. How you doing, Ryan?
Good. Stinks, but good.
Did you say stanks?
No, he said Danks. You said Danks.
I said Banks? Oh. I blame heat stroke. I'm terribly sorry.
No worries.
Does it get warm in Colorado?
Yeah, it's like 100 degrees outside right now.
What?
As you can see, the sun itself is just outside my window here, so it's pretty bright. And the fellow wisecracking on the bottom of the screen there is Walt Robillard, who is tending to his dog at the moment. How you doing, Walt?
Hello.
All right, I have to play our intro music video montage to prove that we're a high production value quality podcast. So 1 second. That's probably enough of that. So welcome to the BAMF Podcast. Today's subject is dealing with bad reviews. Walt, you want to go first?
Oh, my wife called me on Tuesday, and she's like, "Oh, your book got a review." I'm like, "Cool." She goes, "They hated it."
Oh, no.
So it was one of those things where all of the people I sent review copies to, because they got review copies and not purchased or read on Kindle or audiobook or anything like that. When you don't do that, the Amazon algorithm can take up to 4 or 5 days before the reviews are posted. So the people I sent reviews to, they 3 of them were overwhelmingly positive. One of them had a lot of advice to give, which I really appreciate. But of course, none of them have showed up on Amazon. The one that shows up on Amazon first was the guy who was like, "Wow, this had a lot of premise, but man, did it suck." So he made some valid points in the review. He gave me 2 stars, which at least it wasn't a 1 star. That's cool. He made some valid points, which some of which I agree with, some of which I didn't. It's one of those things where I'm kind of listening to it now on audio, and there's just something about a human voice reading something. I mean, I usually queue up my phone to oh yeah, what's up, Josh? The boss, Josh Hayes from Keystroke Medium. There's something about your hey, Sunokin. People, reading your book back to you, you catch a lot of the mistakes that way. 99.5 degrees. Yeah. Mike Lafferty is the same.
I'm in Vegas, so it's 114, 115.
But yeah, so you sit there and you look at it, and and then you try and refresh the screen every 34 seconds to because refreshing it every 32 seconds would be weird, to see if another review gets posted. But eventually you're just like, I know what I did wrong and I know what I did right. And thanks for that, Mike. And there's there's a lot of potential there. Hopefully the positive reviews will hit, and that will do a lot for changing. 1 positive review did post, and we got 5 stars, so that offset it a little bit. And so
you've actually got 2 positive reviews right now.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm partway through the book, so I'll be posting my so far very positive review.
Oh, thank you. The biggest takeaway, though, I think, is I've heard from the guys on Keystroke Medium. I've heard from various authors throughout the space is don't focus so much on the review that you miss the advice that goes along with it. So, like, if somebody gives you 3 stars, those 3-star reviews, there are times when you look at a 3-star review and you're like, man, there's such good info here, right? Don't sit there and look at the number of stars and be like, like somebody just whipped your kid, like, that's my darling. You don't talk about my darling like that, instead. Take a step back, see if there's anything useful in those negative reviews, and take that to heart. Write that down, read it a bunch of times, so find some way to internalize it, because in some of these reviews that might not be overwhelmingly positive, there might be a shred or kernel of advice that you can use that will definitely help you improve your craft of writing. I was just reading it now, and one of the things that you really, really catch on audio is repetitive sentence structure at the start. So like I was just reading a part in the book, and I noticed it when I heard the narrator reading it. There was a paragraph where I started the sentence. I started the paragraph with the word "the," and then obviously the subject. The next one was "it," and then what was going on, and then I repeated that kind of structure, "the," and then the next sentence with "it," 3 times in the paragraph, and I'm
Similar
like,
length too.
no, much different lengths, but
Okay.
the start of those sentences, when you hear it in your ear hole rather than your eyeball, it immediately jumps out at you, and I'm like, oh, you just sit there and you're like, oh man, I so was thinking I was going to get to third base, but the shortstop caught me before I got to first. It's one of those things.
That's interesting. Yeah, because that's not something I would have picked up on.
Yeah, and it's not really a big deal, but I try. One of the editors from Keystroke Medium, Ellen Campbell, she puts out a lot of like hints and tips and tricks and stuff like that. And one of the things she put up, about a year ago, it was this cool color-coded chart. It was just a paragraph, right? And it basically was the instructions for how to write a good paragraph, right? But each part of those instructions, I'll have it. I'll find a way to post it, and then I'll get you a link, Mike, so that you can add it to the show notes. But each part of the paragraph was color coded so that you knew what to look for when looking for those instructions and how to put things together and kind of play with it. It was really neat. And one of the things that it talks about is repetitive sentence structure or repetitive sentence starts and stuff like that. So if you excuse me 1 second, I'm going to mute my mic and go find out why my dogs are trying to change the laws of physics.
Yeah, no worries. I've been lucky with my bad reviews I've gotten for gaming products. Usually there's specific criticisms I'm able to address, and the guy goes back later and adjusts the review. I got one 1-star review for a product recently, and the guy was bitterly disappointed I didn't do something innovative with the OSR rule set in that product. And I said on the Kickstarter like 3 times, once in all caps with bold, is that we were using the Hack the RPG variation of the OSR by Eric Bloat, and just adding a few new classes, and that was it. And I don't know how he read that and got the idea that I was trying to innovate, but apparently he did. So, and then he called out some typos too, which was a fair criticism that I tried to remedy. So, but you first read it, your instinct is like to respond like someone's beating your kid, and that's almost always a bad idea.
Yeah, that's what happened with J-Punk. I had somebody do a first bad review on that. Was someone called out 2 sentences that were absolutely atrocious, and first thing I did was scream at him on the internet because that fixed everything. And then my friends were like, "Dude, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, let me see what sentences he was talking about." And I read them, and I was like, "Oh my god, he's right. I'll never say it, but he's right."
Yeah.
So it did take me to learn my sentence structures and get better at sentences. But and then I have another negative review, but it's in German, so I have no idea what it says. I don't know how I can learn from it, but it's also 4 years old, so I don't know if it's relevant anymore, at least to me. Probably to the product.
Nice. Yeah. There's a guy we do D&D with on Fridays, Michael Rothman. He's huge in Germany. He's kind of like the writer David Hasselhoff, which I've said repeatedly. So like he reads German.
Cheeseburgers?
No, actually, he just on his Instagram and Facebook, he was just marinating cow tongues. He eats weird stuff, but like he speaks German. You could reach out to him. He could probably translate it for you.
Okay, yeah. I haven't even attempted. I didn't recognize that I got the review until it was already 2 years old, and I was like, I still have a 4.5 stars, so I don't care, and just kind of moved on because I'm not in gaming space anymore.
Yeah. How do you think game reviews differ really from novel reviews? Because a novel reviews, it's usually primarily how it was written or like what it was written about. You know, like I don't like space popsicle hookers stories, so blah 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 blah. You know, and it's just like, you know, but a lot of times with RPG reviews, you can get the whole gamut of stuff. How do you guys feel that those two kind of either differ or intersect?
Well, I feel like it's kind of like what Mike was talking about a minute ago, because he said that it was that they commented about his content, that he didn't do anything creative with the space, which I get, because that's what I did with Jade Punk that everyone likes. Very few people read the setting, unfortunately, but they really like the rules that we created for Fate. So I think that's probably the element of the story, like where you have story in a novel and then your prose and all of that. I think the writing and your technical writing more, and the content, what you did with the mechanics, is what's looked at. Setting stuff, I wish more people looked at settings, but I learned a long time ago that they have their own mindset about that.
Yeah, I think it's oh, hey, Walt's in the comments and in the podcast. He's two places at once. Walt Robillard is breaking the laws of physics, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I think you got to understand. I mean, the RPG market is fragmented. You know, people like they like the system they like, and they don't read outside that. And of that subset of people who are going to buy your book, some of them will read the fluff, and some of them are just going to want to see what you do with the rules.
Yeah.
And you know, and they don't care. I mean, there's some people who, God bless them, I love them. They will just buy books for the setting material, and they'll really get into it and groove on it. And that's not most of the gaming audience, though. So you get it depends on who's writing the review. I don't know. It's I don't want to criticize RPG reviews. On the other hand, I do, just because I recently got a bad one. But I mean, I was talking to Ryan beforehand about a few years ago, Anne Rice had this famous meltdown when her Lestat novels got a lot of really bad reviews, and she waded into the comments on BarnesandNoble.com or Amazon.com and started replying to the reviews and really getting into it with the reviewers, and it just became terrible really fast. And she started just kind of throwing out, all right, if you didn't like the book so much, send it back to me personally, and I'll send you a refund. And like 300 people did.
Oh.
And yeah, it's you know, I wish there was a better way to say you want to be cool about it. You know, you want to be kind of mature, take a couple days, accept the criticism, think about it. I mean, there are some really great, thoughtful reviewers out there, and then there are some people who just, you know, like other people on the internet, kind of want to spout off and get a reaction if they can. And
so,
you gotta, you know,
one of the as far as like interacting with those reviews, I really like one of the guys that I've taken jiu-jitsu with for many, many moons. And I only get to train with him at seminars because he's pretty prolific. So you don't really see him in this area too much. But one of the cool things that I always respected about him is that he wasn't one of those guys that needed to be the king of the mat all the time. And one of the things I just made him a rock star superhero, both on the mat and off the mat, was his ability to take criticism and instruction. Snookin'. But the cool thing is, right, he'd sit there and be rolling with you on the mat. And for those who don't know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like, it's very much a type of wrestling. You spend a lot of time on the ground, you know, looking for positions and holds. It's almost like a physical chess match. But the cool thing is, I'd see him get choked out, and I'd you know, see him submit and like tap on people and stuff, and he's just like, and you know, he'd always bring somebody close after that and whisper something to his ear. And the one time I caught him, he was like, he you know, gave me that hug, and he's like, oh, thank you. You know, and one of my other instructors who trains with him, I'm like, how come he says thank you every time he gets caught? And he goes, what he's really saying is thank you for showing me the flaws in my technique. You know, he's using the criticism to get better. He's not trying to dominate the match. He's trying to elevate himself to a level of technical ability that is hard to achieve. So because of that, these guys who are just using the tried and true methods are catching him in stuff. And that those little failures shows him where the technique might work and where it might not. And I think that really applies to the writing, the writing sphere as well. Whereas, you could use a technique in, say, horror fiction, that might not work in something like science fiction. And having reviews that say, hey, this worked or this doesn't. My beta readers and the people I give advanced copies to, I was a little bit worried on the second book in the trilogy, because in the second book, you're supposed to see that all the protagonists are really horrible people. They're criminals, and they're supposed to be horrible people, even though they need to succeed for the betterment of everybody. They're still criminals. They're very terrible people, and trying to do the right thing in a certain situation. And in the second book, I wrote a horror scene. It's very graphic. I had several people who were who were just like absolutely in love with it. They were like, dude, this was horrific, perfect. But the greatest compliment, although one of the more interesting edits I got, and I put this up in my newsletter a little while ago, was one of the edits said, this is not an edit. There is no fault here, but I just needed to point out your protagonists are horrible people, and I routinely hope for them to fail. And I'm like, yes, yes, that is awesome.
Mission accomplished.
Right? But I mean, I think though that in a sense that was also a minor failure on my point, because even though you're supposed to be looking at these people, because like the whole premise of my trilogy was, Darth Maul never really got a chance to have a lot of screen time. You get a little bit more time in the Clone Wars, and the comics did some stuff and novels and stuff, but you don't really get a sense of like the day-to-day where it's totally focused on him. I wanted The Sopranos in space. I wanted John Wick mixed with the Clone Wars, and to do that, everybody has to suck. You can't. I mean, Tony Soprano is a horrible person. But throughout the series, he's the main character, so you kind of want him to succeed at what he's doing because he's the main character, but to have your editor look at you and say, these people, I'm always rooting for your protagonists to fail. In one sense, you're like, yes, but in another sense, you kind of think to yourself, oh no, please. If it was old Star Wars, maybe. Some of the new Star Wars stuff is a little iffy for me. Yeah. But like, I wanted that character that was like, he was abandoned and mistreated and, blah, blah. He was a whipped dog who's now turning around to bite everybody except the very few people who would like give him shelter from the rain, a piece of meat here or there, and blah, 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 but like even that editor's note, although successful in the eyes of myself and several of the beta readers, it just didn't have the same, when I really thought about it, it was like, well, maybe if she's rooting for them to fail, I haven't done my job well enough to ingratiate those people with, because just like I said, the Sopranos, Tony Soprano's a horrible person.
But you wouldn't.
Yeah, but you want him to win. Breaking Bad, Walter White is a horrible person, but routinely you're like, when crappy things happen, you're like, no. The meth lab can't blow up right now. I mean, you're always rooting for them to win, even though they're terrible, because they're the main characters.
Peaky Blinders.
Yes.
Shelby, you want all of them to die a horrible death in a fire, but when they're in trouble, it's like, oh God, get out of it,
Right.
Yeah.
I love that scene where he's like walking around the wedding and he's like, all right, no fighting. And then he starts like, no fighting. And because these people that he's surrounded with himself, they're all terrible.
Yeah.
He's
terrible.
And he's terrible. But yeah, that's but that kind of scene where or that kind of thing where you're like, okay, all right, maybe I haven't done my job enough. It kind of forces you to take a step back and say, all right, what tips, tricks, or tactics can I use to enhance my writing to do a better job at telling this? You know,
I've actually been thinking about this very subject just this morning while I was at the dentist getting needles shoved in my gums.
sorry, it's the fact
No,
that you capped it off with at the dentist.
Well, I had to distract myself somehow because it was quite unpleasant. But thinking of another podcast I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Guy Ritchie, and
Yep.
he put out a movie late 2019 that basically got lost in COVID, The Gentleman, and this is basically a high budget take on his first two previous movies, his first two gangsters in London movies, Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. And I like this movie a lot. I mean, he has charming, talkative, fast-talking English gangsters doing English gangster stuff, and I'm a mark for that kind of thing. But I didn't like it as much as Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and I was thinking about why. And it's those first two movies, when he had smaller budgets, he worked a lot harder to make you empathize with the criminals. And the first one, Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels, it's just these working class English kids trying to save their dad's bar. And even when they're beating up a cop in the back of their van, it's still kind of funny and you're kind of cheering for them.
Yeah.
And in Snatch, oh God, who's the guy who's the skinny English guy with the kicking? Jason Statham.
Yeah.
He's charismatic. You empathize with him.
500. I'm a tough guy once I got 500 fights. Is that what? Oh no, you said Jason Statham. I was thinking Vin Diesel. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Brad Pitt is the fighter in that one, or he winds up being the fighter in that one. It's my favorite Brad Pitt role because he's not just playing, a good-looking, guy who, hangs out on the screen, lets ladies look at him. He actually has a character he's inhabiting. It's in The Gentleman. I mean, it's an interesting story. It's compelling, but none of those characters do you like that much. And when you're seeing which mob's going to take over the pot business in London, it doesn't matter. It's fun to watch. It's a spectacle, but you don't care so much which one wins.
Now, did you see The Wrath of Man?
I've never heard of Wrath of Man. What is that?
Oh my God! It's another Guy Ritchie film. Just came out. It's with Jason Statham.
Okay. Oh yeah.
We got it on that early home release. Pay the $20 and you get to watch it in your house.
Oh, maybe.
Okay.
Which I love because I hate going to the theater. I hate people smoking pot in the theater or throwing jujubes at each other. Won't turn off their cell phones. If it's at my house and I have to pee, I don't miss anything because I'm old. I always have to pee now. So, but the story is about a man whose son is murdered. So he goes undercover to find the murderers, and you find out that the entire story is about don't do shady shit because there might be somebody who's shadier than you are who might be looking for payback. And oh my God, this movie is brutal. This is like, don't be the shark if you don't want the orca to come behind you and eat the fin right off your tail. I mean, like, it is brutal.
So kind of like Taken combined with John Wick.
I would say, yeah, that's a good analogy. But like at one point during the middle of the movie, everything, he's so deep into this organization that he's going into, that things are kind of normal, and you're kind of like, well, this new normal, I kind of like. Because I mean, this guy's had such a crappy time for the last whatever. This new normal, and you start like wishing that the new normal would continue, even though he starts pushing things in the oh shit direction. So like, the writer and the director, Guy Ritchie, did a great job where at some point during the movie, you don't want him to have to resort back to violence. You want him to just like, hey, life doesn't have to be, a series of stalking and chalking, and this, it's, at some point, of course, he starts putting his plan into like overdrive, and it goes like, oh, it's really good. So
it's kind of a classic revenge film.
It's a straight up revenge film. It's so good.
Okay.
And like, and my wife, who was really nice to actually read my book for me, because all the writers I talk to say, don't let your spouse read your book. They're just going to tell you it's nice, and then they're going to move on. And you're not going to see that underneath the dust jacket is 50 Shades of Grade School or something like that, right? So she, brutal. But yeah, she was like, this is kind of like the plot of your story in reverse. I was like, you're kind of right. If the main character in my book had died, and his mentor had lived, this would be this story. Just, not, but some of the armor car ripoff scenes were ingenious. That paintball stuff to actually cloud the screen so they couldn't see what was going on. Oh my God. This is just one of those movies where when you're watching it from different angles, you catch something new every time. Guy Ritchie did a really good job on this. So
all right.
Well, what's interesting is what you said about how you want him to have that moment where everything seems good and you don't want him to break it. And similar thing happened in the Joker movie. Towards the end, you're like, don't go Joker. You're doing good. Keep at it. But then he's got to go Joker. I think, thinking back to Peaky Blinders, every time, because they made everyone that was coming against the Peaky Blinders to be bad guys, even though Peaky Blinders were bad guys.
Yeah.
But they were fighting bad guys, and so you rooted for them. The moments when they had to be bad, when they had to do something evil, they did it in a way where you pitied the character. Where it's he's broken right now. I get it, but I don't want him to do it. Even his brothers don't want him to do it. And so you pity him. And even the setting is dude, please don't do this because it just doesn't need to be done. Kind of like that feeling in that movie where it's look, dude, don't, I know it needs to be done, but just don't. I think maybe that's a good, I've never thought of it till this moment, but if you're going to have a villain that is likable, pity them when there are moments where they're doing villainy.
Yeah,
might be the way to go.
I saw a really good scene on YouTube from Peaky Blinders, and it had that main character, that guy there. I forget the actor's name, but he was a scarecrow and Champions. Yeah, and there's a bit where they have to kill a family friend who's been cheating on him, who's been ripping him off, and his brother had previously told him, how he wasn't a normal man because he was so stone cold. And after he shoots him, he's not quite crying, but he holds his hand up and it's shaking. He's like, see, it's just like a normal man. And it's just one line, but it kind of brought together a bunch of themes. And it's, great writing on that show.
That's excellent. The only thing I didn't like was the 5th season, but fortunately they have a 6th to fix it. Because the 5th was a little bit ridiculous. 4th was amazing.
Now, going back to the topic of the show, for something like Peaky Blinders, what do some of the reviews say for something like that?
Oh, I have no idea.
I mean,
look at Rotten Tomatoes and see.
I looked at it. I watched it on Netflix, and they got rid of the stars and stuff.
Yeah, now it's
which I think is actually a good thing for reviews. I think we need reviews to talk about what it is, but I don't think we need stars because whether or not something is good or bad is 1,000% subjective. But what you liked about it, what you didn't, what worked, what didn't, that's something that we can chat about. And a potential reader could read that and say, well, they didn't seem to like that, but I do like that. I want to read it. But if it's 2-starred, no one's going to want to read it just because the stars. I think the stars is probably what needs to go away.
Yeah.
And it looks like, Ryan, you're not in the minority. If you see season 5, it's the lowest rated season.
Well, I don't like season 5. I hate season 5.
Well, I'm saying people agree with you. It's the lowest rated season.
Oh. Yeah, because it was very obvious what they were doing. The election, they obviously started production after the 2016 election or started writing it after that, and they had a very big skew on what it should be. And the narrative was all over the place. It sucked. But everything leading to that season, and now they have a clean slate where they can come out of it doing good. So hopefully it gets better.
Yeah.
Right on.
I know that The Sopranos was pretty, of course, the TV shows, especially subscription service TV shows. there was a character called Tracy on The Sopranos who got beaten to death on screen, and it was really hard to watch. And the actress, in an interview a few years later, said, "Yeah, they were able to track back to like losing 10% of HBO subscriptions to that specific episode. Because people just watched that and said, nah, we're out." So,
well, that's when I checked out of Game of Thrones, Red Wedding. I was like, I'll watch a few more episodes to see what happens, and said, no, they didn't catch me. I'm done. I don't want a death opera.
Right.
That's a fair description of what that genre was. Yeah, it's you can't get too attached to characters, which is, I mean, it's all banking on the story's going to be compelling enough to keep you interested, but sometimes it's not. I checked out of Walking Dead a long time ago for that reason.
Same.
I was like, they don't know what they're doing. This is just nihilism and spectacle. I'm done. And I wish I checked out Game of Thrones season before I did, because God, that finale was terrible.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah, the last episode I saw was when Tyrion killed his dad on the shitter. I was just like, nothing makes fucking sense. I don't like anybody now. I'm done.
Yeah, and that's tough too, because I mean, a lot of times in reviews for something like that, you're not going to get the people who are writing and doing all that stuff are either making so much money that they don't care, or they're not going to see the reviews that will truly help them, because they'll get buried by X number of reviews that either swing the other way or are saying, pointing to a different thing that just for some reason caught traction and was upvoted or starred or what have you. And that's the thing. One of the other writers I frequently talk to, he likes to read every single review, and he was like, he's like, I don't care what they say, just on the off chance that like somebody with some level of technical ability caught something that I missed. That's the only reason I read them. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. He's the guy who's in knee deep in the water, sifting the sand, looking for that nugget of gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's prospecting for that, for that one little helpful piece of advice that might take his art to another level, which I think that's a level of dedication that is really wild. But at the same time, do you want to spend? Yeah, do you want to spend that much time, knee deep in water, sifting, when you could be pounding the keys and
Yeah. Well, and I used to do sword fighting 20 years ago. Find this teacher, but the best teacher it's pain.
Yes.
You're going to learn the best blocks, because that's how you don't get bruises on your ass. And it's easy to just go to beta readers and friendly audiences and, hey, I love that story, thanks for letting me read it, and that's the end of your feedback.
Yeah.
Which is great for your ego. Is it good for you as a writer? Maybe not. Same time I was doing sword fighting, I was doing stand-up comedy. And if your material sucked, there wasn't anybody in the audience saying, hey, that was okay. Just silence and crickets, and you weren't getting the job done because they weren't making laughing noises with a hole in their mouth, with a hole in their face. And that's a lesson. And you can take it or say, those are dumbasses out there. What do they know? They're not smart enough for my material. Or you can learn from it and try to go on and say, I see what the guy's doing. And I think that's the benefit of reviews. Just you gotta hold your ego in check and be mature enough to take to do what he's doing.
And that's the other thing too. Are you writing to that's kind of like the target that you have to decide which target are you going to hit. It's like being on a range, and are you going to go on target number 1 or target number 2? Now you shouldn't stand in lane 1 and shoot at the target in lane 2, because you're not really going to get an accurate representation of your shot group. The idea is stand in lane 1, shoot at the target at lane 1, right? So there's 2 categories that you can go for in that. Is, are you writing for yourself to work out whatever it is that you want to work out, or you just enjoy the act of writing, and on the off chance somebody likes it too, you publish it? Or are you writing because there's a market for what you are writing and you want to serve that market? It's like people on Etsy. I have just enough time to create an STL for a war game mini once a week. I can post that on Etsy and I never have to worry about it again. I collect my 18% or whatever it is from Etsy and then go on. It's a little pocket money, blah, blah, blah. Or are you looking to develop a war game studio and you have your own 3D printers? You have, this is what you do for a living. You're a service provider, right? You're not doing it just for you because you enjoy it and somebody else might enjoy it too. So here's the STL. You're a service provider. You provide the minis. You provide the STL files if people want to print them themselves. You're providing a service, and that's as an author, you have to decide that for yourself as well. Are you providing entertainment for them or for you?
Well,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, related to that, is there a middle ground? I just feel like
absolutely
there is. Like if you're writing for people to enjoy, but that some people will, some people won't. But if I'm constantly concerned with, my craft, I have to be better at fucking predicates or something, right? But, I can either focus on that and never get a story out, or my outlines need to be tighter because my structure is off or whatever. Or I know that there's a market, somebody likes my stuff. And if I put 200 books out, I'll sell a bunch and I'll make some money. And I'll also be entertaining some people, but I can't do that if I'm spending 4 hours, 6 hours a week studying and then questioning every single paragraph I write.
Yeah. Are you doing it to analyze your craft, or are you like me where you're just like, I want to write about stuff blowing up?
Yeah, that's the same thing. Because I stress to the point where I don't do anything. Because I'm like, no, the structure. Someone's going to see that the climax happened at the wrong time. Or my sentences aren't right. Or I haven't been reading enough this week, so my writing won't be awesome, so I shouldn't write, which is 100% all of it BS. But, I should do all those things. But at the same time, I should work out every day, so my martial arts is better. But I don't even do martial arts as often as I should. But, whatever. So it's still all BS because life is messy and sloppy, and writing should reflect that to some degree.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to Mike's sword.
Trying to make excuses for my own shit.
Back to Mike's sword analogy. I got a frame that a half tire sits in, and I practice my downward cut on that with a training sword.
Okay.
And now with the new dog, every time I raise it above my head, she's jumped up and yanked it out of my hands.
Oh,
so I think that's a great analogy for writing too. You plan one thing and the next minute you're like, what? Where did it go? So, yeah, absolutely. Mike, you were going to say something a little bit earlier, right?
I was probably going to say lots of things, but those thoughts have left my head now, so we can keep on going. It's all right.
Sorry. It's
all good.
Like if you, because nobody is in martial arts. I didn't know you sword fought, Mike. So we have a lot of things here that we can all talk about to relate. It's not bragging, but normally when I go into a martial arts school, unless it's like a hardcore UFC thing, which there's a lot of here, but if I go to like a traditional martial arts school, I am almost every single time in the top 3 people when I walk in, and when it comes to sparring and such, just because of what my experience was and the number of years I have in there. But I'm never the best. And when we look at writing, like I'm okay with that too, because if I'm the best in a room, I need to pick another room. I'm not learning anything. But when I write, there's this feeling like I've got to be best. I've got to be 5-star every time, all the time. And you've got to be, but even Stephen King isn't the best in every room, at least not in my room. And so like nobody is ever going to be the best. And there's got to be a moment that I haven't found where it's okay to say, you know what, it's shit, but it's published. Move on. That I don't know. I don't know how to find that moment. I hope it's there. I hope it is.
A ton of my commanders have always said that never let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah. Ray Bradbury had thoughts on that. His idea was that, and I've heard this about shooting at the range. You got so many bad shots in you. You got to get them out. And I wish I could hit Bradbury's pace. I've been working on one story now for about 3 months, and his idea was you write a story a week, and eventually you get the bad ones out. You'll find out what makes a good story, or at least what you think is a good story. And it's some days you're going to suck. I mean, some days you're not going to be the best father, brother, husband you could be. Some days you're going to be a dick. Some days you're going to misstep, and that's part of being a human. And you try to learn from it and go on and be better the next time. And that's maybe all you can do. So, wow, that was deep and philosophical. Maybe it's the best place to end the podcast before I make a dick joke or something. So,
right,
Brian, Walt.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap it up and call it a show?
Find us on Substack.
Go buy Hunter's Moon.
Right. Oh, yeah. Thanks, man.
So far I'm loving it.
Oh, good.
Chapter 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah, keep waiting.
I just started. But yeah, I'm digging it.
My wife came into the when I came home, we were doing all the doing all the stuff with the dogs, and she came in, and I'm trying to get her attention. So finally I snap, and I'm like, hey, and she turns around, looks at me, and she pulls out her earbud. I'm like, oh, what? I said, what, were you listening to one of the murder novels? She goes, yeah, some dick Walt. I said, what chapter are you on? And she got all excited about it. I'm like, all right, my wife has never been this excited about something I've wrote. Either the narrator is that good. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. So
that's cool. Yeah, dude, you should be. So far, so good. I'm really liking it. And I'm not into military fiction, you know that, but I do like it.
Yeah, well, I tried to cut a good balance because military science fiction, especially if you got a writer who knows the technical ins and outs of what that should look like, if it's too much, you're going to turn off a large section of audience. I wanted to strike a good balance, kind of like that Clone Wars balance, where there was just enough military that you understood that, this is how a military unit operates, but not so much to where the people who came there for the Space Wizards aren't going to enjoy it,
Well, yeah, which so far I think you've done a good job with that, because Clone Wars is that good part for me. Yeah,
I really wanted to strike that balance because I really love Clone Wars. Love it. That seventh season, show, right? That seventh season was like brilliantly executed.
Oh. And the last 4 at the very end?
Yeah, it's brilliantly executed. So I was like, yes, this is what I would like to do. Because like I said, it had that good balance of both the military and like the fantastic elements of the the Space Wizards and the religious order and stuff like that. So I think the downside and some of the other stuff that's out there, when you start getting the Space Wizards, they turn into fucking Power Rangers, and it's just like, no, I don't want that. I want I want it to be a tool, not necessarily. I don't want them to pull open their shirts and have a big S or have to make like 15 different hand gestures before they push open a power ring or something like that and jump into mechanized animals. It's so
I feel like the more you have it grounded and the closer it is to like a samurai movie from the 70s, the more like the Jedi. So, and the more they're like, and when they're in a party with other, like on Clone Wars, where there was a team of soldiers, or on Rebels, where they're teamed up with some weird, droid with a foul mouth and some guy who's not Chewbacca, but looks like Chewbacca. And it's I love that show, but I watch it with my kid. But,
Rebels?
I don't know. Yeah.
Rebels is so good.
Yeah. It is. All right, we're off subject now. Thanks for checking out the Writers Chat on BAMF Podcast. We'll be back maybe next Thursday, maybe in 2 Thursdays, depending on the subject, or if we can get our guest to come back next time. And let me play the little. I should play this beginning and the end, right, Walt? Okay, that's enough of that. And thanks for checking us out. We'll see you next time on the BAMF Podcast.